Giveth Essentials number. Do we know what number it is, the call today?
Let me check and I'll get back to you.
Yeah, it's been a while, I think, since we had one, so really cool to be doing another one today. And the chosen topic is best practices for comms and community groups, working groups using GitHub. Um, and as stated here, the intention of this session is to clarify the best use of GitHub for our working groups. Um, because as we know, GitHub is it's a task management system, and it enables us to work better autonomously and also transparently as a distributed team in communications and communitas. And it really essentially helps us to break down larger projects and initiatives into individual tasks executed by individual contributors with easy oversight for everyone. So the idea that we had today was to describe the ideal flow for using GitHub and what the various steps and phases are. And I'm also happy to do a bit of a demo to show to show the board itself and best practices around using it, to sort of demonstrate the theory. And ideally would really like to keep this interactive. So, I thought like the best way to structure the call today would be to describe the flow itself and the purpose behind the various stages in GitHub, and then also to show some examples live in the board and just really answer any questions and have a discussion about it. And very open to feedback as well. That's actually ideal. Does that sound good for everyone here today, or is there anything that you'd like to add? Cool. So many emojis. Awesome. All right. Very cool. Cool. Well, then I will get started. Um, I thought one of the best things to start with would be just to outline a bit, like clarify really the 9 different steps that we have in the GitHub pipeline, and then can also go into detail on, as I said, like the flow between those steps. We also have some tips around drafting, and also then have some important highlights to go through to keep in mind when creating issues and managing them. And then we have some tips and tricks. So to start, I've outlined the 9 different steps in the GitHub pipeline. If you don't know what that means, that is these different columns that we have here. So new issues, icebox, epics, backlog, sprint backlog, in progress, review QA, done, and closed. And the purpose behind these steps are outlined here. So to start, we have the new issues column. This is a little bit self-explanatory, but basically when new tasks are created to be considered for the pipeline, they land here. And typically they are unassigned. So as you can see here, some of these are assigned in advance, but many are sitting here unassigned. And this just is where they flow to when you click new GitHub issue and start an issue. Then we do have 2 other sections that are less part of the flow, because usually new issues will start being moved into backlog. But they sit here and they're pretty important because we have the icebox section for tasks that will no longer be worked on. At some point, they were decided that they're not going to continue moving through the pipeline to a closed status. So instead of just deleting them out, we typically move those types of issues into the icebox to be considered potentially at a later date to have a record of what has been created. And it's something that we can go through when we're looking for new inspiration or new ideas, and potentially they can become relevant again and be reopened if needed. So the icebox just sits right here next to new issues. And that's the purpose of that. And then we also have another section called epics. And epics are basically an advanced version of an issue that's used uh, as an umbrella for a group of individual issues or tasks that need to be completed for larger projects. So the epic function really gives us the opportunity to group different issues together under one topic, which is very, very useful when we have like product launches. Um, as you can see here, like different maybe comms campaigns that are happening. We've even used it for conferences to group together all the different tasks that need to get done to execute well on a conference. Um, so this is where our epics sit, and they provide us a very good way to like organize. But going back to the flow, so once new issues are ready to be assigned and we want to have like overview of them that they need to be worked on in the next few months or in the next few weeks, we move them to the backlog status. So this is like a very good place to look when looking to pick up new issues as well, because they've probably been already filtered and checked on and been decided that it's relevant to move into the backlog and someone should pick it up. Once it's clear that we want to work on it in the short term, as in the next 1 to 2 weeks immediately, those issues are then moved to the sprint backlog section. That's basically the difference between backlog and sprint backlog, is that it's been determined to have a deadline that's coming up soon. And after that, we have the column, we have the phase for in progress. So when an issue is moved to in progress by a contributor, it's clear that it's literally in progress and is being worked on. So likely there's a draft that's being created and there's writing that's happening or some other production that's happening. And once it's ready to be reviewed, the draft should be posted in the issue, and that issue would then be moved to review QA status, where other contributors are tagged to check the work and provide comments and input. And then finally, once that piece of content has been reviewed and everyone is good to go, and there's a process for this, we want at least 2 reviewers per issue, and everything has been and those comments have been implemented, then the issue can be moved to a done status. And this is where tasks live when they're waiting to go live. So often we have content that needs to be posted on Medium or posted on Twitter, or posted on the website, but it's been already reviewed and is ready to go, then it can sit in this done status. And then the final step is closing the issue. So the idea is that once it has actually been published to a live platform, ideally we're pasting a link to that piece of content that has been posted live, and then we can move the issue to a closed status. So that workflow is just outlined here. Backlog to sprint backlog to in progress to review QA, done, and closed. Just a quick check-in point. Does anybody have any questions about that so far?
Yeah. So, for example, with the epics, it would be a good idea to create epics from the community tasks and communications working groups, or I don't know. My question is, should we all just create epics, or that's just reserved from specific things, or how would that be the best way to manage?
I think so. I wouldn't think of it necessarily in terms of like communitas versus communications. I would of it more in terms of the topic and the project at hand, or, the launch. So, and I think a really easy rule of thumb is just to think about like how, how many of the issues are related to each other. If we have, let's say, 2 issues that are related to the same thing, it may not be necessary to create an entire epic around it, just to group 2 issues together. say it's like a tweet thread and a blog post. But if we have, and that's something we could also determine together, like what the best rule of thumb is for an issue. But if you start to get into like three, four, five issues that are related to one another that are also that need to be coordinated for timely execution, that's where epics really come into play and can be very useful. So again, the easiest example is likely a product launch, um, where we know that there's a date that's been determined for the launch of that product, and there's many different things. Here we only have two, for example, but there's different things that need to be coordinated and need to go out at the same time according to that date. That's a really good example. On the Communitas front, this could also be, I mean, there's a lot of overlap, right? So the PFP collection, it was a good example where we have various, did we actually have an epic for this one? No, we didn't, but where we have various things that are being coordinated, such as Twitter Spaces and yeah, different announcements, maybe emails, um, and yeah, events. But then we also just have, yeah, straight up pieces of content like blog posts and tweet threads. And all of those things could be grouped together under one epic to ensure basically oversight of like we've got all the pieces together to push out this launch. And that involves both working groups. Does that does that answer your question in a sense?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, Nicole is saying, or meet the makers, just like what would be good use cases for opening epics. But yeah, perfect. Just to group a lot of issues together. Thank you.
Oh yeah, or meet the makers. Yeah, this could also be this could be an example, except meet the makers is quite recurring, right? But if we're doing it once a month, I mean, epics can always be opened if it makes organizing easier. I think the key thing to keep in mind is we also want to eventually close epics, um, if possible. So if it's like meet the makers coming up for next month and um, we want to add in, yeah, a certain amount of like tweet threads to promote it, and then there's event organization, and there's also like a Twitter space. For sure you could open up an epic with a date tied to it, for the April meet the makers session. And then once all of those issues have moved through the flow and have been closed, you could then also close out the epic, and then you could start a new one for the next meet the makers session.
Yeah, right. That's what I do, and I would like to like just know if that's a good flow that I'm using, because usually I just like set the date, and once there is this like retrospective session, which is usually the last step that happens, like I just close it. And maybe what's the best practice when I'm then like opening a new one, then maybe for a next quarter, like do I want to? I usually just like link the retrospective session document, so that's reference to the to the like new planning session, and starting from there. And then maybe I have some more like a technical question about like adding these dependencies and more of these like functionalities of a GitHub that I don't like clearly know how to navigate, but I like to make it better. So yeah, just to confirm, is this is like the good flow, or what's the preference?
Yeah, I think that that sounds like a good flow. Like you have maybe if I search this, I should find the example of an epic, right?
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, here we go. So, yeah, it's great because here in the epic you can describe really the overarching goal of of the larger initiative at hand. I love this, how you've created like this different task lists here. And then okay, so you have like an issue here, inviting projects and co-hosting, but also what would be great then is adding in the tweets that are being written to promote this, um, and anything else that coincides with this specific event. And oh,
Mhm.
sorry.
Yeah,
And
I usually just leave it up to those leaders of those initiatives because I noticed that if I personally create that issue and tag the people, maybe it's not like so so clear for others just like to notice or just coming and for example, we have this plan and we have this like Discord tweet thread where we navigate all details and then I know that when Almon is will be ready to like start like working with Rodri on the design, she will come in and link the issue to the epic and yeah, that's how we normally roll.
okay, I think like really in the sense this kind of creates a space for project management, right? So it's like even when you're setting up the epic and you start creating issues for it, I think it's ideal to add them in right away.
Hmm.
Because then at least it's even if they're just sitting in backlog, but then you have oversight of like, okay, here are all the different pieces. It's like a puzzle, right? And here are all the different issues, and then in one nice view here, you can see exactly where everything is at.
Hmm.
So I would say like the best flow is really like as soon as issues are created for this initiative, like add them to the epic right away. And that doesn't mean they all need to be worked on immediately. Um,
Hmm.
but yeah, I do think this is a great way to organize around. And again, it might be overkill if you just have the one thing, like the one issue. Um, it doesn't really make sense then maybe to have an epic, but if you have multiple, then it makes sense.
So thank you. That's a good feedback.
Is it clear how to add issues to an epic?
For me, it's clear to create a new epic within a new issue within the epic. But can you just like demonstrate the process? Let's say if I want to tag an existing issue to the epic, how would I do it? Just to make sure I got this right.
Yeah, why don't we use that example? Because I don't see an issue for that tweet thread. That doesn't exist yet, right? I just want to be sure.
Yeah,
Okay.
correct.
So an example would be creating the new issue, and we say, and this will actually take me before we go to that, I'll just really quick just highlight I can circle back to this, but we'd um an ideal way to use GitHub, and this is something we've touched on in the past, but something that would be nice that we implement across the board moving forward more is like naming of the issue also adds a lot of clarity, like when looking at the board. So adding in like the topic, the medium format, and like the estimated date of when it should be done by. So in this case, we could say like the topic is uh, Meet the Makers Spanish edition. And then we say the medium, which would be tweet. And then there's estimated date it should be done by. I'm just going to throw in something right now. We said April 19th is when it's actually happening. So say we want to promote this April 10th. Then we add in a description here, um, create a tweet to promote this upcoming Meet the Makers session. And then we can, this will be assigned eventually, but leaving it in new issues, we can add the epic right here, right away. So you can search for this. Here we found Meet the Makers Spanish edition. Oh, this is actually Earth Day, right? Yeah. The thing about GitHub to know is sometimes it's a little bit slow to take. It can be a little glitchy on this end, so you just wanna make sure that it actually populates here. I've had it before where I add it to an epic and it doesn't actually take, and I've had to go back in and, like, add it again. But you'll see that it populates right here, and now this issue is in that epic. I will just maybe change this to, um, birthday. Great. And now we can submit this. And you'll see it is sitting in this epic, and it's tied to this epic now. So when we go back, where that is, we see that there's now this issue here. And what's really nice is it gives you the oversight of like, okay, here you can actually in a sense, just start listing out all the tasks that are needed to make this thing happen, right? That's really the goal. And then the next step can be like, okay, looking at, well, this needs to be assigned to somebody. And what's really nice is when you have the dates organized, you can see which ones are most urgent to get assigned and worked on. Um, yeah, with other topics, maybe we have a blog post and some bigger items, but the tweet really needs to go out first to start promoting it. Then we can at least like see April 10th, April 12th, April, 15th, and ensure that the issues are moving through the flow because it will show you all the statuses here to get to the finish line by the correct date. So, yeah, that's some context on epics. Any other questions around this?
I have one more, sorry.
Sure.
So, what if I have found a existing issue that actually should be linked to the epic. So like can I actually go into epic an issue that somebody else created and link it to the epic, or that person who created the issue can do it only? I would like to understand just like this little detail, and that's like all that I have pretty much for today.
Yes, anyone can do that. Um, it does not need to be assigned to you for you to make that change. So example is, I have actually a tweet thread here. I mean, that might not be the best example because I'm tied to it, but you could do this as well if you'd like and just go in and another point is issues can be tied to multiple epics. So that's also something to mention here. So this particular tweet thread is linked to a program launch for a referral program, but also we do have an epic that we use for compiling Twitter content. So I think I would like to also add this to the Twitter epic. So now you can see it's added to 2, and anyone can do this. You could have done this as well. So retroactively adding tweets to an epic is no problem. And actually, maybe just to add to that, there are a couple of cases where we have epics that we're not closing, and the Twitter epic is one of them. Simply because we decided this a while ago that it would be useful to have one epic where we are collecting all of our Twitter contents. Um, and that can be really useful for us in the future to look back on everything that we've produced for Twitter, find like really, really great threads that we've written. Um, there's also the option, it creates an automatic filter. If you click view on board, to see the board with just our Twitter content, which can be really useful for someone who's managing social media platforms. So we've considered this in the future for other platforms as well, to make sure that we have oversight of content and planning that out for execution. That's just an FYI. Okay, so any other questions on epics? Let me know. We'll have some time as well on the call. To move forward maybe with a couple of other points, I've also added in some tips around the actual ordering of issues. So in case you're not aware, this is also a refresher that issues with the most urgency behind them should be moved to of the top of the column that they sit on in the board for each stage, right? So issues can actually even be pinned for high priority visibility. An example of this is right here. So in review QA, and the way to actually move issues to the top, by the way, is simply drag and drop, which is really nice. I would definitely keep the newsletter at the top here because that's very relevant for this week. In review QA, you can see that we've even tagged some of these as high priority, which is done simply by clicking on an issue and finding this pin button right here next to the stage. So you simply click this pin and it will tag this and move it to the top of the board as a high priority item. If you made a mistake, you can also unpin it as well. Also some tips on drafting and QA process. So content can actually be drafted in Google Docs. Sometimes it's drafted in Medium for blog posts, wherever appropriate to ensure like correct formatting of that piece. And when it's ready for QA, the owner can actually add this into the issue and tag people. The rule of thumb is really to tag at least 2 people because we want to have at least 2 independent reviewers per piece of content. And then the idea is to incorporate the comments and make final formatting adjustments. This might be a good point to walk briefly through the flow of like creating an issue, moving it through the stages, and to done, but let me know if that would be valuable to everyone here. Because I can do a bit of a live demo to demonstrate this, but if everyone's pretty clear on how that works, maybe actually what would be more useful is starting with like the creation of an issue and going through all the different steps to like properly set up an issue.
Yeah,
Actually,
I think that's better. And also this session being recorded so we can share to new contributors in the future and so on. So I think that is great.
okay, let's do that. Before I move into that, any other questions here? Just want to check in. Oh, okay, great. Yeah, so we have this section here that outlines highlights on what's really important to keep in mind when opening and managing GitHub issues. And wanted to put it here like quite simply, but we have these core components, which are naming the issue when you start the issue. And this will give, like I said, oversight on the board of what that issue likely contains, where it's going, what's involved. There's a big difference between a tweet and like a blog post for reviewers, and when it needs to be done by. So just for task management. Then we also have a description field that needs to be filled out. We also need tasks to be assigned to an owner. Then we have the option to add epics, as we just touched on. We also have the option to add dependencies, which we can touch on, and labels. And also then there's the component of moving the issue to the correct status, which leads us into our flow. So yeah. So to fill out a description, this is pretty, I think, self-explanatory, but we want to be as clear as possible to outline the details of what's entailed with that task so that anyone would be able to pick it up. Ideally, it could be picked up almost with minimum to no explanation outside of reading through the description of that issue. And and then there's the component of assigning an owner, which is like the rule of thumb here is really to try to keep assignees to one person because it helps a lot to just have one owner to move that issue through to completion. That doesn't mean necessarily that the owner needs to be doing everything in terms of the execution. It's more that the owner is taking ownership of the progression of that issue. And ownership could always be passed over in case an owner is taking on the first part of the issue of actually like gathering the information necessary to fill out the description. This might be often used in the case of like having a new product that's going to be launched. Sometimes we need to gather the appropriate details first for comms to actually, uh, correctly execute a piece of content around that. So someone could take ownership in the first stages of the issue to work with the dev team, maybe demo the product, get all of the information necessary that's going to need to go into that blog post or that tweet thread. And once they've filled out the issue with all of the details that are needed and corrected that information, there's a possibility to pass on ownership of that issue to the next person who has agreed to actually create the piece of content and get it ready for publication. But yeah, ideally there's just one assignee per issue to avoid any back and forth on like who's supposed to be moving it forward. Then we have the option to add epics for larger topics to have better organization around launches. We also have the option to add dependencies. So this can be used when one particular issue might be blocked by the progression or lack of progression of another issue. We often have the case where we can't, let's say, put out a tweet thread to promote a Medium article if that article has yet to be completed and published, right? That wouldn't make sense. So we may have the tweet thread done, but it is blocked from being published until the article is ready to go and has been published, for example. We also have the option to add labels, and labels can be really useful to indicate if things like additional details. So if design help is needed or something is blocked or any additional context that you want to add there. And then finally, very important is moving the issue to the correct status for transparent oversight to everyone within the working groups of where things are at. And this is very, very important really across the board to minimize all the, checking in work that's often the case, right? Of like, hey, where is this thing at? Where is this thing at? Ideally, it's stated there. You can see in the status that it's being worked on and also in updates within the issue itself. So it's probably quite helpful to actually show this live. So I'll go ahead and demonstrate like creating an issue. So yeah, actually, this is where you'll find the button in the top right. And as we mentioned, here you can see like all the different components that I was just going through. So you have basically the option of moving the status, you have labels, assignees, you have epics, and here you have a way to create a title for that issue, and you have a description field that you can fill out before publishing the issue itself. You also have the option to attach different files in case there's graphics that would be helpful, or also links can be added. There's a lot that you can actually do here to provide context around the topic at hand. So is there anything someone would particularly like to see created? Otherwise, I will just make something up.
Yeah, I think that maybe a test or something will work just for us to know. Well, I don't have anything like right now to create.
Okay, cool. Um, well then, let's see, we can create something really basic, let's say like for a blog post. We have we do have, and I'll pick, since we've got an upcoming launch here for a referral program, I'll just pick something along those lines. Um, maybe, yeah, I'll just create like a duplicate of this. So the naming of the issue is again something that we were mentioning, right? So ideally, we'd like to have the topic at hand mentioned. So we have Giveth referral program, makes it very clear what this piece of content is for. You add a dash, and then you can add in the medium, or well, in this case, it really is medium, but the format of what the piece of content is. So in this case, we want medium, or we can say like a blog post. We do use medium for our blog posts. And finally, let's say a date, and this is an estimated date. It's not, doesn't need to be written in stone, but it's an estimated date for when we want this piece of content to be executed by and to be ready by. So if our launch is set for March 30th, we want to make sure that we have the blog post ready by, say, a couple of days in advance. So we're going to say March 28th. Then the idea here is to write out a description that gives context on what needs to be in that blog post. So create a blog post outlining the details of our Giveth referral program. And then you can do different things here. Like we can outline, first off, like the context of that program. So details of the program to mention. You have different features here to make this as clear as possible. Bullet points. Just going to write some different things here. And we essentially want to use this space really to take context. Let's see, like talk about the different rewards, how rewards work. Anyone else want to throw some ideas out here? Yeah, where people can go to generate a link. And let's see, like when we're launching. Okay, so once we've got that going, there's, like I said, also option to add other context here. And what we'll do is also look to the left here and determine first off whether this is ready to be assigned to someone right away. Otherwise, it can be left in new issues. You have the option for labels here to add more context. So we have a lot of different labels here. This is not something that we use all the time. It's, at this point, really optional, but perhaps this blog post is going to need some design work. So it could be flagged at a later point once we're ready to generate a graphic for this blog post. You could add in the design label. You can also add in the content label here. Anything else that we want to flag. If it comes to a point where the execution of this blog post is being blocked by another piece of content, that can also be used here. Assignees, here we have the opportunity to assign this to whoever might be creating the blog post. So if we already know that, okay, for sure, like I'll be creating this, I can add myself. And as we said, we'd like to ideally keep assignees to one person. Doesn't mean other people are not going to work on this. It just means that I am the owner of ensuring that this issue moves to a done status by March 28th. And then we have, as mentioned, the option to add this to an epic. So in this case, I'd want to add it to the Chainvine referral program launch. Just gonna add this here. Okay, great. And then once you're ready to publish this, you can go ahead and submit it to a new issue. And I'm actually going to preemptively move this into the backlog status and just put it ahead there. Great. So now we have this issue published. It's sitting in the backlog status. It's been assigned to me. And once we're sure that it's ready to be worked on, in the next 1 to 2 weeks, it can be moved to sprint. Now, there was a quick question about adding dependencies. There is this dropdown, as you can see, like this issue has no dependencies at the moment. It's something that is an option to add in. Say there's another issue that's currently blocking this, you can tag that issue. And it will flag that, currently we can't move forward with this until this one issue has been completed. So maybe I can, it's gonna be okay. I'm just gonna do this for demo purposes, and then I can remove it later. But as you can see here now, it's indicated that when you look at this issue that you can see that, okay, something's going on here. We can't progress until we see what's going on with this issue. And in this issue, it will also be actually referenced here. And Nicola, you had asked a question about this. Does that provide a little bit more clarity? It's a pretty simple feature, but it can be a very important one, especially when coordinating launches.
Yeah, can you hear me, guys?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is just perfect. This is all I really needed to know. It clarifies everything for me. Great. Thanks.
Okay, awesome. So, and then obviously, actually once that's been resolved, this can also be removed. And moving through pipeline stages is very, very simple. It's right here. So here is where you can toggle. And this is, again, very important to use regularly and to keep your issues up to date. So once it's ready to be worked on, we can move this to the sprint backlog. It will show that update. It will show that update here momentarily, I guess. Sometimes a little bit slow. And yep, here we go. And then the purpose of this field down here is really to start providing updates around the development of the issue. So maybe some new things have been found out, that some context needs to be added here. Other contributors can add context. You can also tag other contributors here for clarity on, can you provide some details here? Comments can be left. And then as we move through to in progress, maybe some more updates are provided. Maybe there's some commentary back and forth with different contributors. And then finally, once we're in the review QA status, the ideal would be to post a draft here. So I've drafted the content for this blog post. Here is the link. And here you can paste a link to the Google Doc with shareable access for comments, and tag to contributors for review. So then review and comments will happen. And once those have been, then it's really the responsibility of the owner to implement those comments, check again for a final review. And at that point, the piece of content or the issue can be moved to done so that that piece of content can be published on whichever platform it's meant for, which in this case would be Medium for a blog post. And again, once that has been finalized, post Medium link here once the blog is published and move to close. So, and to close an issue is simple. You can either close it right here and click closed, or you can move it up here to a closed status. And you'll see there that it's sitting here. Oh yeah, at the very top. There we go. And that's it. So that's a very basic flow. Do you have are there any questions around this?
No, I think it was very clear. Thank you, Corey. I think that we really needed to have a defined flow for us to follow. Only maybe kind of like, well, if no one has questions regarding the process, of course, I think Franco wants to say something.
Yeah, I just have like a question about like the processes specifically for documentation. For example, like you just mentioned that we should have 2 reviewers. What I'm like, my flow with documentation is usually just 1 reviewer, which is Suga. Like mainly I work with her in documentation. Is that okay as well, or?
So I know the ideal is 2. I don't know, Lauren, would you have any input on that specifically?
Yeah, I think that having, well, if there's small changes, I think it's okay to just have like one person to review. But if you're like writing documentation for like a new product or something that's like a whole new thing, then we should get at least 2 people to review it, and at least one of those people should be like really familiar with the product.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. If it's, yeah, sometimes we do just have those slight tweaks, right, that are very clear cut. But if it's a new piece of documentation, and it's another good point, tagging relevant reviewers is also really helpful. This comes, I guess, with a bit of experience of working within Giveth and understanding like who's kind of more specialized in what, but just ensuring that's the idea with the rule of 2 is that at least then we're a bit more covered in terms of like diversity of understanding of products and also the voice of Giveth to fact check, well, to check really the copy of the work, and ensure that like all the details are in there. It does, I almost said fact check, but really the fact checking, it's important that that happens during the initial research process. So when taking on a new issue, um, especially when it's product related, it's quite important that the owner of the issue does the research in advance directly with the most knowledgeable contributors within the organization, which often might sit in the dev team, but making sure that it's thoroughly researched and all of the points are really highlighted in the description of the issue so that when the content is written, it's already been fact checked in advance, and reviewers are tagged really for double checking more the voice of Giveth and the copywriting and grammatical fixes, things like this. So that's just some details on the review process. That's a question. Sorry, go ahead.
Maybe what do you think that we can start doing to improve our GitHub process? I know that, for example, for me, sometimes I open too many issues and then I forgot to close them. And then rather Lauren or you, Corey, close it for me. But I don't know, what would be like something that we can do to improve our GitHub, or what would you say?
This is really, I think, like, comes a lot down to habit building and having a habit of going into this board every day in a flow that works best for you. But one nice, that's true. I didn't actually mention the tips and tricks section. So it's a good segue to this because to kind of keep track of your own issues, because really it's on each individual contributor to have ownership of their own issues and ensure that they're updated really daily, because this is a board that we're all using to work together autonomously across many different time zones and different parts of the world, right? So this is our tool to be aware of like what's going on. So one great little trick here is if I want to see everything that's I'm responsible for, I can simply type in my username, and in one go now I can see everything that's on my list to be accountable for, and to in the sense of like your question, to clean up as well, right? Like, so if I'm looking now at these issues that are sitting here in done status, did we actually put this tweet thread out already? Yes, we did. Okay, I need to go, like, I see the data's already passed. I need to go check Twitter and like make sure I grab that link, um, post it, here, and close the issue, right? Because we're already past that point. So I think really it's about setting the intention and having the habit to make sure that your issues are just up to date in the right status, and doing that on a very regular basis. And that's going to help us all work together a lot better. And the idea now would also be to add in, to make the changes on the titling, because I think this actually helps quite a lot. That is the idea, is like adding in the dates will actually help all of us to have oversight of our own work and our own deadlines, but also for the team as a whole to have oversight on these things. So it's already a flag if you see March 25th sitting in backlog, right? Because today is the 28th. So that would help a lot. So we can filter issues in that way. You can also search by certain keywords to find every issue associated with a topic. If we know like, hey, Chainvine is happening soon, let's check everything going on with that. Okay, we've got a lot in review QA. That's good because it's coming soon. And all right, otherwise we just have the epic. Perfect. So we can check the epic as well for oversight. But this is a nice feature to see everything related to a topic. And then finally, you can also set up notifications for yourself, which we're going to go to your inbox and your email by using the watch button in the top right and selecting participating in mentions. So we have this watch feature here. You could also have all activity, which is going to give you email updates on every single issue. It's quite a lot. But you have other options here as well. But I highly, highly recommend this one so that you're receiving notifications in your inbox whenever someone is mentioning your name or regarding tasks or issues that you're already tagged on. So yeah, that's GitHub. The ideal is that we keep this as clean as possible, implement some of these changes, and yeah, make it easier to work together.
Great. Thank you so much, Corey.
Thanks, Corey.
Thank you. And this is all outlined here in this Notion doc. So just make sure that everyone's aware. This is under the Giveth community building section of our Notion, GitHub for comms and community. Everything's listed here. If there's anything that we should add here, please flag it, because we want to make it just clear and concise for everyone. And there's also, so under new issues tagged as high priority, there's a little like cheat sheet that was created by Lauren a while ago that iterates a lot of this stuff as well. So a couple different places you can find this information.
Thank you, Corey. Awesome session. Clear.
Yes, thanks. My God, it was awesome. I must say that setting up notifications was a game changer for me.
Good, I'm
Finally could
glad.
everything. Cool.
Thanks,
Amazing.
Corey.
Thanks,
Thanks.
Corey.
Thank you all.
Thanks. Bye bye.